Let's talk about Alan Greenspan. For almost 20 years, this guy was basically the conductor of the global economy. As chairman of the Federal Reserve, his words could literally make or break fortunes. Everyone called him the Maestro, the man who just knew. But after the smoke cleared from the 2008 financial crisis, a new question started getting asked. What if the man who knew was actually blinded by what he believed? That's the paradox we're going to unpack.
So picture this. It's October 2008. The world's economy is in a freefall, and Alan Greenspan, looking totally shell-shocked, is sitting in front of a congressional committee. They're asking him to explain how this all happened. This wasn't just about bad decisions. His entire life's philosophy was on trial. And to really get his answer, you have to get the man.
And believe it or not, this whole story, it doesn't start with some complex economic theory. It starts with a little boy who was just looking for something, anything he could count on.
Yeah, so Greenspan's dad, Herbert, he wasn't around much. He'd just disappear, leaving young Alan completely heartbroken. His biographer, Sebastian Mallaby, points out that Alan learned a tough lesson very early on. Depending on other people just leads to pain. So what did he do? He retreated into a world he could totally control. A world of baseball stats and railroad timetables. Why? Because numbers don't lie. They don't let you down.
And this escape into numbers, it really defines his whole early career, even when he was, technically trying to be a star.
Okay, so what's so wild about this is the total split personality it shows. I mean, on one hand, you've got this guy touring the country as a jazz musician, playing sax. But even then, his true self just couldn't help but come out. During breaks, while the rest of the band was goofing off, Greenspan had his head buried in finance books. He was even doing their taxes. He was always the reliable numbers guy in the background, the sideman, never the main attraction.
Look, a quiet life of just crunching numbers was fine, but Greenspan wanted something more, a bigger purpose, and he found it in this really radical, totally uncompromising novelist and philosopher.
Ayn Rand's whole philosophy, objectivism, it was like it was tailor-made for a guy who trusted cold, hard logic over messy emotions. Her big idea was that pursuing your own rational self-interest, completely free from government meddling, wasn't just a good idea, it was a moral imperative. For Greenspan, this was like a lightning bolt. It took his love of numbers and gave it this huge, powerful moral mission.
And this is the part that changed everything. Rand completely transformed him. The quiet, humble data guy became this super confident ideologue. Her inner circle, who, by the way, nicknamed him the Undertaker, gave him the kind of intellectual validation he'd always been looking for. He wasn't just some bookkeeper anymore. He was a key player in a movement that was going to change the world.
Okay, so this brings us to the giant contradiction at the heart of his career. Because when he finally got the top job as Fed chairman, the things he did often looked nothing like the things he believed.
Let's just look at the track record, right? Whenever the market started to freak out, this hardcore libertarian turned into the ultimate interventionist. After the Black Monday crash in '87, he flooded the system with cash. In the '90s, he orchestrated these massive bailouts from Mexico and the hedge fund LTCM to stop the bleeding. The guy who preached against government interference became the government's #1 firefighter.
And yet, at the exact same time, this is what he was saying out loud. He's stuck to his guns, this core belief that markets, left totally alone, were the only way to go and that regulation was always the problem. So, how do you square these two versions of Alan Greenspan, the doer versus the believer?
Well, Wall Street came up with a pretty simple answer. They didn't listen to his words, they watched his actions. And they came to this really powerful conclusion they called the Greenspan put. It was basically this belief that you could take massive risks because if it all went south, good old Uncle Alan would swoop in and save you with a safety net. It was a classic case of privatizing the profits and socializing the risks.
And this is where the story really takes a turn, because while Greenspan was busy running around putting out all these fires, his core ideology was letting someone build a much bigger and more flammable building right under his nose.
And this chart just shows you the problem perfectly. During the 90s, the market for derivatives just exploded. These are basically super complex bets on what something's price will be in the future. Some regulators were screaming about the massive dangers, but Greenspan, staying true to his Ayn Rand roots, fought tooth and nail to keep this whole casino unregulated.
He had that exact same blind spot when it came to the housing market. He truly believed that lenders wouldn't do anything to destroy themselves, but with nobody watching, that's exactly what they did. You have guys like Angelo Mozillo at Countrywide, who are literally bragging about their zero down, no doc, fast and easy, subprime loans. It was an absolute race to the bottom,
all based on this crazy idea that house prices could never, ever go down.
And if you want to get a sense of just how insane the arrogance was, just look at this number, $75 million. That's how much a subprime lender, a company whose whole business was giving loans to the riskiest borrowers, paid just to put its name on a baseball stadium. The warning lights weren't just flashing red, the system was throwing itself a massive party.
So you have the pragmatist, constantly saving the day. And you have the ideologue, just letting risk pile up higher and higher. Well, eventually, a day comes along that is just too big to be saved.
And in 2008, the music finally stopped. All those bad loans, those impossibly complex derivatives, that faith in the Greenspan put, the whole thing came crashing down. The very system that Greenspan had both rescued and enabled for 2 decades just imploded, and it took the entire global economy down with it.
Which brings us right back to that hearing room. Staring at the wreckage of a global collapse, Alan Greenspan, the man who supposedly knew everything, finally had to admit something. He said, in his own careful way, that he had found a flaw in the model that I perceived as the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works. Let me translate that into plain English for you. His entire ideology had failed, spectacularly.
So, in the end, his story leaves us with this huge question. Was Alan Greenspan this one-of-a-kind, flawed genius whose own personal history blinded him to the dangers of his philosophy? Or is his story really a warning about the danger of any rigid ideology, about the catastrophic price we all pay when we let unquestioned belief completely ignore reality?